Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 8, I believe it is, of All Things Metaphysical. I'm Gail.
I'm Kelly. 8 already? Wow.
And yeah, I know, I couldn't believe that we've already done 8 episodes. So I think we were going to talk about a couple different things today. We were talking about before we came live. We were going to talk about the full moon and how that affects everybody. We're also going to talk about how medications can affect your spiritual gifts and things like that, because it can have an effect, even how the vaccines can affect you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think those are great topics to talk about. But I was thinking about the full moon because it was yesterday into today, or it's today. I've seen two different
Yeah.
dates
Today,
for it,
too.
the
Yeah.
19th or the 20th. When I worked in the behavioral health hospital, you would be able to walk in the morning at like 6. Well, I used to get there by 7. And there'd be like 4 codes in a half an hour. You never needed to look at a calendar. You always knew when it was a full moon. And
Yep.
the term lunacy, I believe, is very fitting for that because it
Yeah.
really does happen.
It does. Absolutely. I worked in a group home for mentally disabled, will be nice.
Mhm.
It's, um, people, and these were adults, and my absolutely favorite and absolute least favorite at the same time person was at that home. And
Mhm.
every full moon, without fail, she would be ripping her clothes off, running down the street, screaming at people.
Mhm.
And if someone tried to grab her, she would bite them.
Mhm.
So every full moon for years when I was there, I would get a call from the police department saying, "Would you come get your client? We've arrested her again. And by the way, bring her a bathrobe because she's naked." And it was just, I adored her, and she was so frustrating at the same time. But it was the full moon. Every time she did that, it was a full moon. It always was very interesting to me.
Do you do any kinds of rituals on new moons or full moons?
I do. Um, it depends on the time of year for me, but tonight there will be a drum circle here. We were
Mhm.
going to do it last night, and not everybody could make it, so I decided to postpone it and make sure that we had everybody there. I do things like that a
Mhm.
lot of the time. We'll record stuff. I'm in my recording studio right now, and a lot of times we'll just record the drum circles. I have very long mic cords that will actually reach all the way outside. Um, that's usually the typical stuff that I do. Although there are more involved rituals that I have done too. It depends on if I need to let something go or if I'm building up towards something else. What those might be.
I've been known to put my crystals in the moonlight
Yeah.
sometimes to help clear them. But then sometimes they're so charged that it changes the whole structure of the crystal to me. So I don't know about anybody else, but I love when crystals have entire conversations with me or tell me what they're for, or tell me where they're from, or tell me which ones they want to be next to. And I
Yep.
just think it's very funny.
Yeah, and that happens more for me around the full moon,
Hmm.
but sometimes at the new moon as well. Depends on, like I said before, what I'm doing. I
Hmm.
had a very interesting Reiki student one year who uh, she would go on journeys inside
Hmm.
certain crystals, and she would come back and she would tell us all about what the crystal said to her and how she experienced it and why it was either the perfect one for her or not the one and she wanted to exchange it, those kinds of things, which I always was really interested in her stories about walking through the crystals and those kinds of things. We have a watcher.
My spirit team once, and this was just a really interesting experience because this doesn't really exist, but this is how they explained it to me. They were, hi, everybody who's joining us. We appreciate you being here. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section and we will do our best to answer them. I haven't identified everybody by name because this is also going to go up on YouTube and I didn't know how people felt about that. So just protecting your anonymity a little bit, because the comments don't come through on YouTube when we post the videos there. So that is why I'm not calling anyone's name out per se. But so my spirit team gave me this lecture and they took me to this diamond field, which doesn't exist. It was a field covered in diamonds. And then they said, okay, this is your lesson to pick out what's genuine and what's fake. And
Ah,
so they made me walk through the diamond field and point out which of the diamonds were real diamonds and which of the diamonds were put in as fake diamonds to help me with navigating the world and navigating people. Because if I can
nice.
do it with the diamonds, then I can do it with people. And it was such a cool experience, when my spirit team took me on that journey. That was back when I used to meditate often. I don't really meditate anymore, except when I'm drawing. Then I meditate when I'm drawing. So, but I'll never forget that. Out of all the lessons that they've given me, that one is always so crystal clear in my mind.
That was a good one. I can see that. That would be really interesting. How did you do on that test?
But I passed with flying colors. I'm like, that one's not bright. That one's dull. That one's missing something. I'm like, how many of these fake ones did you put in here, people? Because, and then they gave me like an overview of it, and the real diamonds lit up,
Ah,
and the fake ones were like kind of gray.
interesting.
It was such an interesting lecture.
Yeah, that would be an interesting lecture. I know in Arkansas, they find a lot of Herkimer diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to one of the places where they said, you can't not find one. I did not find one. But leaving, I found one on the side of the road leaving. So I guess all those other ones were not mine. That one was mine. I always found that interesting too, because we walked in the road. It seems like I would have seen it going that way, but nope.
Oh, you have lots of stuff flying around in your office today. Usually they're all over my head. So that was just kind of like, wow, somebody else has that. It's not just me.
Yeah. One evening after our show, there were orbs everywhere in here. It was like batting them out of the way to walk out without walking through them. It was very, very nice, actually. The feeling was very nice. But I like that kind of stuff. Things that creep out a lot of people. I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Bring it.
I know that when I do readings now, when I do live events, everyone isn't watching me. They're watching the show that's going on over my head.
Yeah.
Whereas I've decided to call them now Orbeez because it makes me laugh. So I've nicknamed them, and then we try and figure out who it is, who's coming through, how close to my head are they. And apparently, spirit's agreeing with this conversation because things are going off. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's good energy. Even though not a very good segue, but last week I was coughing a lot. It was last week, right? Yeah.
yes, it was
And
just
I ended up finding out that I had multiple infections going on, and I had no idea.
Mhm.
And so now I'm on lots of medication to clear that up. And it is absolutely making me loopy. It's my energy is off. I walked in here this morning and I realized when I hit my head on the door that I was sort of leaning as I was walking. And like, oh, well, that's different.
Mhm.
So apparently my equilibrium is really off. Um,
So when
it's
you're on medications, do you usually get more messages or less messages or weirder messages?
I get a lot of weird stuff going on. And some of them are really easy to decipher that it's a real message coming through, and I work with my spirit team all the time, so I know them. But sometimes even they, when they know I'm not quite my normal self, even they will mess with me. I have a beehive down the road, and I get honey from them
Mhm.
frequently. And I had brought it home, and I know where I set the jar on the counter. And I laid down. And when I went back to look for the jar, you could see the ring on the counter that the jar had been there, but it was on the opposite side of the sink. I'm like, all right, wait a minute. And my keys came, I couldn't find my keys, and they came sliding across the table at me. Things like that happened to me. And I know it is my spirit team messing with me.
Mhm.
But I also see weird things. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, who are you? You know, but this time it's affecting me a lot more than it usually does. And I think it's just because they're hitting me with so many really big medications at
So
once.
what's it like to do a podcast on so many different atom medications
It's
right now?
sort of, I'm kind of like floating, you know, but you know, it's all right. It doesn't bother me. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of, you know, it sort of amuses me
Okay.
more than anything else. But I did a reading last night, which was really interesting because it was I see things
Mhm.
about the person I'm reading. Anyway, usually hours, if not days before
Mhm.
I start picking up things. Last night, it was like they were in 3D coming at me. Like, whoa, wait a minute. But yeah, that has never happened before. So that has to be due to the meds that I'm on. It was fascinating though. I felt like I had to like duck out of the way because instead of me seeing like a movie of scenes, it was like they were being thrown at me like darts, you know. So
I know that, like, when I've had head migraines, I've drawn mandalas before, and people are like, how can you do that?" And I'm like, "Because the energy that comes through me when I'm drawing soothed the migraine and, like, pushed it out of the way, and as soon as I would be done drawing, like, my head would start throbbing again." It used to be the weirdest thing,
that's
and,
a good thing though.
what?
That's a good thing though, you get some relief. Yeah.
Yeah, the same one I've had most of the like I've had, I know that this is a topic that some people align with, some people don't, but for work I had to have the COVID vaccines,
Mhm.
regardless of my personal views. I work in healthcare, it was required of me.
Yep.
I did some things to mitigate it in my body before I got them, but um, and I know that like when I got the first one, I was sick for a few days. When I got the second one, I had really wild symptoms that no one else has ever had but me. And then
Wow.
the third one, I was fine, but I remember drawing during those times, and I think I ended up drawing COVID, like healing pictures during that time. But like I know for me, like if I've taken my migraine medicine and I'm loopy, or if I have a migraine, I get out of the way, and those are some of the most profound channeled pictures that I'll create because I just appreciate the respite and I disappear and I let whoever wants to come in and draw create those. So,
Yeah, your mandalas are very, very powerful though. I have some that I have framed
mhm,
on my wall, and people will occasionally come in. Usually it's when I'm doing a Reiki class
mhm.
because they're up on that wall. And I had one girl, and she was like looking at it from every angle, and she put her hand in the middle of the picture, and
Mhm.
she said, "That is some energy." I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm glad that you noticed that."
Mhm.
But I wonder how if you had that feedback from other
Yeah,
people.
I'll never forget one night I was home and I get this call from a guy from England who now lives in Dubai. And he's like, found your mandalas and I was looking at them and my whole room dissolved. Is that normal? And what my mandalas really are, the word mandalas probably isn't the best way to describe it, is they're portals.
Mhm.
And they'll take you to different places. And um, the way that my spirit team, they will never give me the full information of exactly what my mandalas do. Like they'll name them and I'll have some ideas based on the name of what they do. But like I've drawn series of ancient gates that look like if you stack them all together, it's the lock that's going to unlock the ancient civilization and ancient. I did a lot of those for the rainforests.
Yeah.
And things like that, probably like 5 to 10 years ago. That was a really big theme. The medical pictures right now, and to promote myself a little bit, in the book from last year, I've never released an entire year's worth of pictures before, ever. And it was such an important year for where we're going as a humanity and stuff. So I created 2020, no, the Great Awakening of 2020, a mandalic journey. And then if you count the front cover, there's 108 pictures.
Wow.
108 names of God. So it just was interesting. And then I laid them all out based on topic, but in each topic, it's in chronological order of the year. So you can see how the year progressed and what we were working on through the year. And I think the section that had the most pictures was light codes.
That makes sense, actually.
To help us last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very chaotic year. And I think into at least the first half of this year, we still had that kind of like a hangover from all of the upheaval from last year. But yeah, light codes have been big, and we should probably at some point go into more depth about that.
Maybe not today with how you're feeling, but
with the way we would have lights going everywhere. And that was the other thing I was going to tell you, because it was last night. I woke up in the middle of the night, which is not unusual at all for me. And I woke up and there were big, huge numbers, like 3 feet tall, and they were floating around in different colors, and they would go in this way and then they'd turn back around, and some of them would flip around, and I watched that for a long time before I fell asleep. And then I dreamt about it, and it was just, I still am trying to decipher what it was, but it was intense. It was quite interesting.
I know that when both my parents were still on this realm, the power, because I was taking care of them, our power had gone out for like 36 hours or something. And they were both on oxygen, and I was like freaking out and kept calling the power company because of it. But it was really interesting because I went to sleep that night, pitch black. And all of a sudden I wake up to this glowing blue light. And I'm like, the thing that was glowing was me. I was glowing blue. I'm like, where is this light coming from? And then I look down at my body and I'm like, I'm glowing blue. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I had a middle of the night thing where my now ex-husband, we were sleeping, and he woke me up screaming in the middle of the night, and he said, "Why are you glowing?" And oh, hey, look, I am. Wonder why. And we separated shortly after that happened, actually. There have been a number of people in my life that I have terrified to the point where they have to get away from me. But yeah, it's interesting. The combination of the colors with the numbers, and then there were letters every once in a while. It was
Maybe they were the winning lottery numbers for you. Do you remember what the numbers
were? I wish I'd written them down then. That would have been great. And I'm still not sure if that was a result of all the meds that I'm on, or if it was somebody, it was probably one of my guides messing with me, is probably what it was.
Dancing numbers is a new one.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had that before. I've had ribbons of light, but I haven't had, numbers floating around changing colors. And that was really Interesting.
So if any of our viewers have any questions, please put them in the comment section and we will do our best to answer them. If not, we will just free float to topic to topic to
We
topic.
will do that.
We don't have a problem with coming up with things to talk about, and we would like to make it relevant for you who are watching if there's something that you want us to cover. So
Yeah.
either
I'd
way
like
is
to
okay.
know where the lady found the huge diamond in Utah, actually.
I don't think I've ever told floating numbers, kind of like flying colors. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever told that diamond story before. You know, I mean, I think I put this in the last book. I think we talked about this when I wrote I
Yeah.
Still Know What I Know. And I remember my spirit team telling me I needed to get an iPad. And I'm like, why do I need to get an iPad? And they're like, because you need to really become fluent with the touch technology and moving things around. And I'm like, well, why do I need to know that? And they're like, just do it. Because, I like to ask a lot of questions and they don't like to answer them.
Yeah, they don't
And
like.
so, and then I think I put this in the book, but then I have this, and I'm sure I still go to it. I'm just not aware of it anymore, but I was hyper aware of it for a really long time. Like a control panel that controlled like all the crystals of the earth
Yeah.
and moving things around. And I know that once I was working with a teacher, ooh, big orb just went by. I was working with a teacher and we were in my Akashic records. And I ended up fixing the issue with the Bermuda Triangle, which was a misfiring beam from Atlantis. And so it was putting things in and out of dimension. So I guess we're going into the weird this evening. So
Well, we can go into the weird because I have a Bermuda Triangle story.
okay.
I have distant relatives who shrimp boat. They have boats, and we were off the coast of Florida, and right before we crossed that imaginary that we're in Weirdville now is what my uncle said.
Mhm.
Weirdville, we're going into Weirdville. Everybody, hang on, and it was certainly weird. We had things phasing out where
Mhm.
you could see the shimmering,
Mhm.
and then it would be fun. And then it would phase out, and then it would be fun. And we went back to shore because it was getting a little weird.
Mhm.
And about 2 months later, I got a call from someone who said they had gone through it where we would kind of graze it on the side. They went straight through it and had a really interesting experience where they were gone for 3 days.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden they were back, and they were in the same position they would have been in had they just stayed still, but
Mhm.
they actually went into it. So, they've actually been written about in a couple of books, and their story was on a TV show I saw. But I
It
thought,
makes me think of the movie, was it Contact? The one with
yeah,
Jodie Foster,
yeah,
where she's gone supposedly on Earth time like 3 minutes, but there's like a recording of 15 hours.
right. Yeah, it was a strange story to hear about, especially so soon after I had just been there.
Mhm.
And you see all of a sudden it's like a portal, that you go through. And I don't know that I would have gone through it.
Mhm.
I think with my experience with portals, some of them you just never know, but that they did.
One of our viewers said, like the TV show Manifest. Well, we don't know what Manifest is about as of yet, but my guess is it's going to end up being something like a dimensional portal
Right.
or something like that. Um, one of the things that I learned a long time ago, and I don't know if this is true or not true, but this is how it was explained to me, is when you start seeing things in the media, that's the way, and movies and TV shows and stuff like that, that's the way to prepare us as a society for stuff
Right.
that's probably started happening 30 to 40 years ago. It's like they're
Yeah.
starting to change our awareness and our thought process so that we can actually handle what's going to end up coming.
Yeah. That's I I had a teacher that told me that same thing, that the media is preparing people. And she says, so really what they're doing is they're preparing everyone to see the stuff you've been seeing all along. I'm like,
Mhm,
probably.
mhm,
But it is kind of interesting that there are all these shows.
mhm,
One that I don't watch a lot, but I've seen is Ancient Aliens, and that show just cracks me up every time I see it. I'm like, you guys are just now figuring this out. You could have made a phone call. I could have told you what was going on there. But I think that is true.
mhm,
It just feels like that is how it would happen. The videos that have been quote unquote leaked from the military
mhm.
about, the underwater vessels, and they've seen them come up out of the water and they've seen them, disappear. Um, I don't think those things are leaked. I think that's a very cleverly manipulated thing that the military is doing. And I think our government and all governments actually have been cooperating with other intelligences for
Mhm.
a long time. So,
It's
but
just it's always so interesting to me, having all this like knowledge that I get downloaded with all the time. It's like, when do you say stuff? When do you not say stuff? How much do you actually share with people? What's too much? What's not enough?
yep,
And sometimes people will ask me questions and and I'll answer them to a point, but I always have this sense of when I'm going to push someone beyond where they're ready to
yeah,
go.
yeah,
And I take what I do, I have a lot of responsibility because of how my opening was, that I don't want to do that to anybody else. So sometimes I'll say things more as questions, or I'll ask them questions to try and move them past where they might be stuck a little bit.
right.
But it's their journey, not mine. Not everyone does not have to believe what I believe.
Right. And that's the point I came to too. But I do understand what you're saying about only saying so much.
Mhm,
I've been that way my whole life. I tell people as much as I think they can take. There was something I said to a classmate, and I think it was like fourth grade, and it upset him to the point where his parents took him out of that school
mhm,
and moved. And I have remembered that ever since that happened. He
mhm,
wasn't ready to hear, and he asked me a simple question,
mhm.
and I answered him. And I probably should have just said, gee, I don't know.
It's really funny. When I was little, I mean, in the neighborhood I grew up with, all the kids played together, and I had this white pedal car. And the little boy down the street had a fire truck, but he always wanted my white pedal car. And I was always terrified when he drove it because I thought that's what was transporting me multidimensionally. And he didn't know that that was going to happen when he was in the car. I mean, I now
Right,
realize it wasn't the car, but
right.
at the time I'm like, oh my God, mom, dad, you got to go get my car back. He can't handle where that's going to take him.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to think it was a little gold car. I had a gold pedal car, and I used to think that that was what it was. And I had this idea when I was a kid that, and I don't know where this idea came from. I really honestly don't. From when I was really, really little, I thought there was a chip implanted in my head and the moon was tracking me.
Mhm.
And
Well, I
my
have
whole
some
family,
ideas where that thought may have come.
well, yeah, but my whole family laughed at me for decades because I would insist, well, the chip is moving. It's not where it was. And, the moon is going to track me. And they would just laugh and laugh. But in a kid's mind,
Mhm.
that made perfect sense to me. With everything that I had gone through in my life, that made perfect sense to me. And that's the only thing that I could think of that would explain it. But yeah, that little gold car took me into space several times.
Yeah, I also was thinking about my parents sent my brother and I to camp when I think I must have been like 11 for like 4 weeks. And I remember that was the first time I ever bilocated. And like I was clearly someone else. And my friends, when I kept saying, "We've been calling you for 15 minutes. Why didn't you answer us?" I'm like, "Nah, I wasn't here." You're pretty, but I remember being jerked back into my body. I don't think I'll ever forget that feeling.
Yep.
And I mean, I think I still bilocate from time to time because I've heard people tell me I saw you here, I saw you there. I'm not aware when I do it anymore, but I was so crystal clear aware of that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been known to show up in hospitals at people's bedsides when I'm in a different state, So yeah, it's interesting. But that being jerked back into your body, that reminds me of my one of my near death, well, my first near death experience. It hurt.
Hmm.
It hurt, and then I was sore. It's like, okay, I died on the surgical table. You brought me back, and now you don't understand why I'm sore. And I remember trying desperately and unsuccessfully to explain to my doctor that my entire body was sore. My shoulders hurt, the back of my head hurt, my hips hurt, and it was because I was slammed back in,
Hmm.
and they just couldn't understand that. And finally I just stopped explaining because they were going to put me in a padded room, I'm certain.
Yeah, I remember I was taking this class, and my teacher used to go to Brazil to work with John of God. And when she came back, she's like, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I would have gotten you a hotel room." She's like, "You were walking down the street." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Although I could describe everything in great detail, but
Right.
I was physically there.
Yeah.
Talk about what that location really was. Whew.
Yeah.
Guess
Yep.
we'll get to that in another episode. But depending on if you believe in multidimensional beings or not, I really don't like the term aliens. Um,
Yeah, where I live, the term aliens is not appropriate because you know, well, for one thing, I don't honestly believe that any person can be an alien because we're all on Earth. But um, it gets really ugly around here with aliens. I'm very, 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 very clear, very close to Mexico. If I drove to the end of my property and threw a rock, I might be very close to hitting the border. But it's interesting to me what different people think. In this area, we have a number of unexplained lights in the sky, different things. And I always know what they are. And honestly, I usually wave at them. Hey, but there is a kid that lives down the street, and he came running up to me one day, it's fairly recently, and he says, "It's true. Oh my God, it's true. It's all true." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "I saw them. I saw them. It's true. They're true. It's true." And he was just so excited and so like in shock at the same time. And I just, okay, and I just left it at that because, his mother is running after him at that point.
mhm.
And, I've said more than enough to kids in this area that have come into my orchards picking fruit and that kind of stuff. So I am very careful what I say. But it was still interesting to me how many young people recently have started to embrace different intelligences, different dimensions, portals.
Mhm.
There's a kid that is convinced he stumbled on a portal up in the mountains here while he was hiking. I think he probably did.
Hmm.
But in my lifetime, that didn't happen. It wasn't kids being excited and have to tell somebody. It's very, very different.
So if we're going to talk about that, what are your thoughts about Mount Shasta? Speaking of portals.
Well, there's not only one. Um, I've camped on Mount Shasta,
Uh-huh.
and I can tell you there are a number of energies there that come and go. It has been under surveillance for years, even though people say it hasn't been. It has been, and it's a major portal. It's not just where occasionally things happen. There is stuff happening there all the time. There, we were hiking. I was with a couple of friends. This is probably 30 years ago now, and we went around a corner, and we were back at our campsite. And we went the other way, and we went around a corner, and we were back at our campsite. And we're like, huh. And it was just things like that just kept happening. And I'm being told it's not the right format to go into detail. But yeah, it's a freaky place. And yet I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it, even though I was terrified.
So maybe on a future show we can talk about sacred sites in the world and maybe what they really are and the energies. I know that when I went to Sedona, I think I told this story, is that my spirit team said I could go to 3 different places to have the experience that I needed to have. I could go to the Casa in Brazil with John of God, which I was not going to. I could go to Taos, New Mexico, or I could go to Sedona. I chose Sedona. And it's funny because I've never traveled by myself before. This was my first trip by myself. And I remember driving down the big hill when you see, you drive into Sedona. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
the mother ship. All these vortexes are the chakras of the ship. And it was just really interesting. I'm like, this one's this one's this one's this. And I was in this crystal store multiple times because, of course, I hit every crystal store in Sedona.
But you have to.
And then I was flying back, and this guy's like, I'll put your suitcase up there for you. And he's like, what's in there, rocks? I'm like, yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And so I decided to have my aura picture taken after I was hiking like all day. So now keep in mind, they knew me. I'd been in the store pretty much every day since I've been there. And so then they took my aura picture, and I was solid blue.
Uh-huh.
They're like, who are you? How did you do this? And all of a sudden, I was like the center of attention. I'm like, I'm the same person who was in here 15 minutes before you took my aura picture.
Right.
You ignored me the entire time. Now you have 8 gazillion questions for me. And I thought it was fascinating that my whole picture, I mean, I was just solid blue.
Yeah.
And
That. Yeah.
they're like, we've never seen that before. Well, welcome to my world. Apparently, I glow blue while I'm sleeping, so
Right. Right.
not a big surprise. But it's just always interesting to me is I try and treat everybody, doesn't matter what I just try and treat everybody the same. It shouldn't
Right.
have been such a huge shift just because you saw my aura picture.
Right. Right. And sometimes it is the spiritual practitioners that have the hardest time. There is not terribly far from where I am a monastery, a Buddhist monastery that has a vineyard, and they do brunches that are absolutely divine. And I have gone there frequently through the years. But the first time I went with a group of brand new friends that I met just after I moved into this area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm from the Bay Area, and all of this is like you hear these conversations on the street corners. I mean, it's nothing. But here, it's very different. And I walked in through the door, going out to where they don't want you behind their doors. They want you out in the vineyard. And this monk came up to me, throwing himself at my feet. Do you know who you are? It is so nice to see you again. And I'm like, haven't been here before, but hi. And the people I was with were absolutely just flabbergasted. And that was the one and only time I went anywhere with them
Uh-huh.
because they were terrified.
How would you describe what a blue aura means?
Blue is a high mind color. It's generally teachers, generally, I've been told prophets, seers have a blue aura. Can be blue, can be light blue, can be darker blue, can even evolve into purple, which is what tends to happen to me. They'll get blue and then immediately after purple. And it's one of what I've been taught is sacred colors. You have white, you have blue, you have purple, and those are generally your sacred colors. Generally, if you have a blue aura, you can see auras. And I know you can see auras. So that holds true for you. Yeah, it's a good color to have.
Sometimes I'm all green. It just depends on what I'm going through at the time. But, I'm taking a class right now and I got paired up with somebody yesterday. And at the end of our time together, she's like, I don't know what it is about you, but I really like your energy. Like, yeah, I've heard that once or twice. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I get complete strangers coming up to me. Can I talk to you for a minute? They tell me their entire life story, and it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
There have been people in my life, my family members, who will like, oh no, I hate going out in public with you. I forgot because people will stand there and talk to me, and it's just like a magnet. I've had people, I had to come and introduce myself. I don't know what it is, but I am drawn to you. And that's frequently what teachers and healers get.
I've always had, like, when I was a therapist, I always had like a cult following. Like, I used to do an eating disorder support group every week. I did it for like 12 years. I think the biggest one I ever had was 46 people. And it was notoriously 35 to 40 some people every week. And they're like,
Wow.
how, how are you doing that? We can't get anyone to come to any other groups. How do you consistently have this many people come every week? And I know at different times, like, people that I've worked with are like, are you psychic? I'm like, no, because you can't answer yes in a
You
hospital.
can't, no.
And then they're like, so then my nickname has always been, and I've never resonated with this, is that my nickname has always been Guru Gale. Like, every set of patients, that's what it ends up being.
That's funny.
And then I had patients or people that I worked with, I don't like calling them patients, they made, like the What Would Jesus Do bracelets. They started making What Would Gail Do bracelets. And I'm like, you guys need to really stop this. I mean, it's causing the other therapists to feel bad. And I wasn't trying to get the attention. I wasn't trying to do that. It's just everyone just like would attach to me.
Yeah.
What's funny about that, Kelly?
It just resonates. It's just like, hey, wait, I know this story. Yeah, when I was working as a therapist, it was kind of the same way. And in the house, the halfway house really is what it was for adults, that I were the woman every full moon, ripped her clothes off, went screaming down the street. The residents would fight over, because we always had two caregivers on site, and they would fight over who got to be on my half of the house. And I literally have fights over that. And finally, I had to leave. It was, I'd pull into the driveway and be mobbed by, 8 residents. And it was not, no, couldn't do it anymore. There comes a point where you give and you give and you give and you just can't do it anymore.
Mhm.
And when you're working as a therapist or a counselor or a nurse, they use you and abuse you and then toss you aside and get in a fresh body. And that was my very rude wake up call to maybe go in a different direction. You can only be overworked for so long before you throw up your hands and say, enough, I have had enough. So, but that was my favorite job that I ever left. And I think if they called me today, enough time has passed, I'd probably work for it again. I'd probably do it all over again because it's just something about the giving and, the helping other people. And it makes it a really tough job to leave. Yeah.
Anything else you want to cover today?
We've been all over the place today. At some point, when I feel like I'm in my head again, I will watch this show back and go, "What is that?"
We had natural tangents today. We
Yeah,
weren't really way off. I mean, they followed a natural flow.
yeah.
So,
So,
all right, everybody, we will see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, same bat place. Till then, have a great week. If you have any questions that you want us to talk about, reach out to me and Kelly, and we'll make sure that we get them covered for you. Everybody have a great week, and we will see you again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.
bye.